Abraham Lincoln said, "You can fool all the people some of the time and some of the people all the time, but you cannot fool all the people all the time." Hello everyone, I am MD and this is the Fourth Branch program. Every Saturday at 10:30 a.m. and 6:30 p.m. we present a special program right here on the Fourth Branch. Tonight we will be talking about the Brett Kavanaugh nomination, or rather the cancellation of the Brett Kavanaugh nomination. There are two very important topics about this aspect of this news. Number one, a number of individuals have already made up their mind, especially from the Republican side, that they want at all costs for Brett Kavanaugh to be placed on the Supreme Court. On the other hand, Democrats have been fighting tooth and nail to prevent Brett Kavanaugh from being placed on the Supreme Court. When the accusation by Christine Blasey Ford came forth, it was almost as if it was a godsend to the Democrats. However, Republicans was not fazed by the accusation. Republicans call it a Machiavellic strategy by the Democrats. They even accuse Dianne Feinstein of setting this process that way in order to run out the clock and prevent Kavanaugh from being confirmed. Democrats have been defending themselves from the accusation. It is difficult to know who is right, who is wrong. However, there are two main aspects of this situation that need to be addressed. The first one is, regardless of who is at fault, meaning did the Democrat decide to keep that information hidden until such time to use it? If that's the case, does it justify what the Republicans want to do? When the news came out, Chuck Grassley, who is the chairman of the Judicial Committee for the Republican Party, said the vote will proceed as planned. Orrin Hatch, who is also an quote-unquote elder in the Republican Party, who is also part of the Judicial Committee, labeled Christine Blasey Ford as a mixed-up woman. Now, I'm not here to discuss who is right, who is wrong, and I'm not here to say who is more believable, who is not. However, the whole nation has a stake in the nomination of Brett Kavanaugh. Irrespective of who is right, who is wrong, we ought to pause for a moment and decide, do we want Brett Kavanaugh on the Supreme Court? Of course, if you ask a Republican, the answer would be absolutely. And the reason, and if you look a little bit further, or you ask a little bit further, you will find out that it has nothing to do with the Republicans having given it some thought, but rather just because Brett Kavanaugh is a Republican, Republicans want a Republican on the Supreme Court. In fact, that's one of the biggest problems we have in this country. Both the executive branch and the legislative branch are political arms of the government, meaning they're engaged in all sort of scandal, corruption, and so on. Thus far, the judiciary branch, which is the Supreme Court, has not been tainted as much. As such, if we want to have a country for our kids, our grandkids, our great-grandkids, it is time we make choices which guarantees such outcome. Whether Judge Kavanaugh is guilty of what he is being accused of or not is totally irrelevant for this conversation. And the reason is because if we ought to take the accusation alone, you can look throughout the country and you'll find out that there is a stark division among the constituents. Earlier, I was reading about a group of sexually assaulted women who are quote unquote for Kavanaugh. Needless to point out, those women are Republican and they do not care a bit that maybe, just maybe, Kavanaugh may be guilty of what he is being accused of. And this is a sad moment for the country. And the reason is actually very simple. If we, these generations, are making choices that will impact future generations, our kids, our grandkids, our great-grandkids, which will impact the whole nation without even thinking for a moment, then we are of no use to the future of this country, Democrat or Republican. Which brings me to the reason of this conversation. Irrespective of the accusation, I personally cringe at the idea of Brett Kavanaugh sitting on the Supreme Court. And it has absolutely nothing to do with the accusation. And in fact, it has absolutely nothing to do with any of the topics that were brought during the confirmation. Not Roe versus Wade, not any of those topics. It has to do with Brett Kavanaugh, wisdom and judgment. In my analysis, Brett Kavanaugh doesn't have the judgment, the wisdom to sit on the Supreme Court. The reason, when the accusation of Brett Kavanaugh came forward and being spread, propagated via the network, the news media, Judge Kavanaugh's reaction is a window to how unfit he is to sit on the Supreme Court. Any sound-minded individual, let alone a judge, would ask without any hesitation for a pause and to have the matter cleared, because that's what a judge does. If a judge doesn't have the wisdom, the temperament to analyze a situation and clearly take the right approach, a situation that is not a complex situation, as being accused of sexual harassment or sexual assault. The charges themselves are critical, important, but the situation is not dire. In the comfort of his home, Brett reacted in such a way that it is necessary for us to take a pause and say, do we want that person to deliberate in complex matters the nation will be facing? Let's take a quick look at what really happened. Now, we're going to show you a short exchange between Brett Kavanaugh, not during the confirmation hearing, but rather last Thursday rather, during the process of hearing Christine Blasey Ford and later on Brett Kavanaugh in his defense against the accusation. Now, as I said, if I were to be in Brett Kavanaugh's shoes, interestingly enough, the minute this information came out, my first reaction was, if I were Brett Kavanaugh, I would issue a statement through a spokesperson and ask for all activities to stop so that this matter can be cleared through the proper channel, which is the FBI. And Brett Kavanaugh is well aware of that because he was involved in those type of processes for a very long time. The very fact that Brett Kavanaugh, in the comfort of his home, could not come to that quick judgment that was the proper course of action. And on top of that, after being given opportunities after opportunities, he didn't take any of them. That is a window to how unfit Judge Kavanaugh is for the Supreme Court. This is not his first rodeo. Brett Kavanaugh currently sits on the Court of Appeal in the District of Washington, which is a position that is just one level lower than the Supreme Court. In other words, Judge Kavanaugh has enough practice as a judge to be able to pass judgment with wisdom. And in a situation which involves him, it clearly shows he doesn't have such wisdom. For that, I completely disagree with the idea of putting Judge Kavanaugh on the Supreme Court. Let's take a look at his reaction the minute that he heard that he was accused by Christine Blasey Ford of sexual assault. Take a listen.
This whole 2-week effort has been a calculated and orchestrated political hit. Less than 2 weeks ago, Dr. Ford publicly accused me of committing wrongdoing at an event more than 36 years ago when we were both in high school. The day after the allegation appeared, I told this committee that I wanted a hearing as soon as possible to clear my name. I demanded a hearing for the very next day. Unfortunately, it took the committee 10 days to get to this hearing. In those 10 long days, as was predictable and as I predicted, my family and my name have been totally and permanently destroyed.
As it is obvious, Brett Kavanaugh's reaction was less than wise. He demanded a hearing to clear his name. A judge who is well aware of how the process works, a hearing would not clear anyone's name. A hearing is simply a venue for the individual to simply say, I didn't do it. It doesn't clear anyone's name. A hearing provided the opportunity for one individual or both to come across as convincing, but a hearing doesn't clear anyone's name. And the irony of the whole thing is Brett Kavanaugh is well aware of the process to clear his name. Any wise individual would know that the best course of action is to stop the process and to let FBI carry out the investigation to clear your name. FBI is the only body in our government that does any such investigation to uncover the truth. So if Brett Kavanaugh could not, in the comfort of his home, come up with the simplest option, and a wise one as well, I have no trust in his judgment because he didn't show any. And it wasn't just a spur of the moment, because obviously one could say that, well, maybe he was emotional. Maybe the minute the news came out, he was upset, he was outraged. Understandable, it could have been. But he is a judge, someone who is tasked to make decisions that impact not just individuals, impacts communities, impacts groups, impacts the whole nation. That's what a judge, especially at his level, and now is looking to be on the Supreme Court, where his voice will impact the whole nation for generations to come. Brett Kavanaugh doesn't have the temperament to be a judge on the Supreme Court. But most importantly, he does not have the wisdom. And what is worse about this whole situation is the fact that beyond that first reaction, Brett Kavanaugh was given opportunities after opportunities to clear his name. And yet, his reaction was less than wise. It doesn't matter to me at this point whether Judge Kavanaugh is guilty of the charges or not. Not that it's not important, because obviously the victim would want to see that at least some action are taken. But to me personally, it does not matter. What matters at this point is to see that the Brett Kavanaugh doesn't have the temperament to be a judge on the Supreme Court. Brett Kavanaugh doesn't have the wisdom to be on the Supreme Court. And anyone who wants to place Brett Kavanaugh on the Supreme Court just because he is a Republican, and this also is unwise, because your kids, your grandkids, your great-grandkids, future generation will suffer. The whole country will suffer. We cannot afford to place on the Supreme Court someone who doesn't have the wisdom of a judge. And up to this point, up to today, we know that Brett Kavanaugh doesn't have that kind of wisdom. Let's listen for a moment to an exchange he had with another senator, Amy Klobuchar. Let's listen to that.
I've done some drinking in high school and college, and many people even struggle with alcoholism and binge drinking. My own dad struggled with alcoholism most of his life, and he got in trouble for it, and there were consequences. He is still in AA at age 90, and he's sober, and in his words, he was pursued by grace, and that's how he got through this. So in your case, you have said here and other places that you never drank so much that you didn't remember what happened. But yet, we have heard, not under oath, but we have heard your college roommate say that you did drink frequently. These are in news reports, that you would sometimes be belligerent. Another classmate said it's not credible for you to say you didn't have memory lapses. So drinking is one thing.
I actually don't think that's the second quote's correct. On the first quote, if you wanted, I provided some material that's still redacted about the situation with the freshman year roommate. And I don't really want to repeat that in a public hearing, but just so you know, there were 3 people in a room, Dave White, Jamie Roach, and me, and it was a contentious situation where Jamie did not like Dave White at all. And I mean this.
Okay.
So Dave White came back from home one weekend, and Jamie Roach had moved all his furniture out into the courtyard.
Okay.
And so he walks in, and so that's your source on that. Okay. So there's some old.
Drinking is one thing.
And there's much more. Okay. Look at the redacted portion of what I said. I don't want to repeat that in a public hearing.
I will. Could I just ask one more question?
Redacted information about that.
Okay. Drinking is one thing, but the concern is about truthfulness. And in your written testimony, you said sometimes you had too many drinks. Was there ever a time when you drank so much that you couldn't remember what happened or part of what happened the night before?
No, I remember what happened, and I think you've probably had beers, Senator, and so
you're saying there's never been a case where you drank so much that you didn't remember what happened the night before or part of what happened?
You're asking about, blackout. I don't know. Have you?
Could you answer the question, Judge? That's not happened. Is that your answer?
Yeah, and I'm curious if you have.
I have no drinking problem, Judge.
Yeah, nor do I.
Okay, thank you.
It is I was speechless watching a judge, currently a judge in the Court of Appeal in the District of Washington. That was his performance. I will put shortly the video that I prepared, which is part 1 in the series of that the nomination of Kavanaugh has been canceled. Again, as I mentioned earlier, the invitation, the invite that you got about this particular program says that the nomination of Kavanaugh has been delayed indefinitely. Let's begin after a short break to look into this situation, which again I want to make it clear that my thought about Brett Kavanaugh is not related to the accusation against him. It is simply based on the observation of his reaction in regards to the accusation. He showed no wisdom whatsoever as a judge. He has no temperament. He is disqualified to be on the Supreme Court. Not because of experience, not because of knowledge, because I'm sure he has plenty. He brought that up last on Thursday. He went to Yale. He's been working in different capacities in the government at high level. He pointed that out. I'm not referring to his credential. I'm referring to the fact that Brett Kavanaugh does not have the wisdom to sit on the Supreme Court. And for that reason, we should not let that happen. Because if we do not prevent it from happening, yes, you may have a temporary satisfaction of getting what you want, but what you want is not good for your kids, for your grandkids, for your great-grandkids, because Judge Kavanaugh doesn't have the wisdom that is needed to sit on the Supreme Court. It proves that beyond a reasonable doubt, to use language of the court. So stay just for a moment. We'll be right back to start the conversation on the actual topic, which I already mentioned is a 4-episode series during which we will move towards explaining the importance of how I reached that decision and the importance of looking at those situations, not from a political perspective, but rather, if you care about your children and if you care about future generation, then it is time that your decision is made not based on political affiliation, but rather on how much it is going to be impacting your kids, your grandkids, and future generation. I'll be right back.
In 1996, a small network by the name of Fox News was launched with just 17 million viewers. Today, with over 100 million people watching regularly, Fox has become the greatest threat to our democracy, constantly bombarding the airwaves with false information, distortion of facts, and outright lies, presenting to its audience as news. Fox has created an army of blissful ignorance. According to a recent survey, 82% of Fox viewers are ignorant of facts and the truth. To keep millions of people in ignorance not only prevents democracy from flourishing, but it also clears the path to authoritarianism, to dictatorship. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Nothing in all the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity." Let me finish by saying that democracy cannot survive in an environment where truth and facts do not matter. At Fox, truth and facts do not matter. Indeed, democracy in America is in jeopardy. It is a crisis the country can no longer ignore.
The program is not for everyone. Now let's get to it. Question number 1. Would you entrust your teenage daughter to a known rapist? Question number 2. Would you have a known pedophile cared for your toddler? If you have difficulty answering either question, this program is not for you. If your answer is yes to either or to both questions, this program is definitely not for you. If you answer absolutely not to both questions, you should definitely stick around. We have a very special program for you and we will get right to it in just a moment. But first, we will give you 1 minute to either close the video and move on to something else, or at this present moment, move on to something else, because this program may not be suitable for you. Here we go. Let's find out. Hello again, I am MD and this is the 4th branch program. If you are still here, it is safe to conclude you are an individual of some level of decency. In the beginning of this program, we usually warn individuals who do not have any level of morality, any decency, because this program is not catered for any of those individuals. As mentioned in the beginning of this program, it is catered exclusively to those with common sense, a spirit of patriotism, and a determination for a more perfect union. Today we have a very special program, and as you already seen on the screen, a news update that the nomination of Brett Kavanaugh has been cancelled. I know the minute that you look at that on your screen, you scramble on the internet to find out where else are you able to find detail about this program. Fortunately, we do have detail that you may not be able to find anywhere else. But the update that you're currently looking on the screen is absolutely correct. But before we get to that point, let's take a look at a few things that pretty much going on in this world. People travel all around the world to come to the United States. Now, there are many categories of people who come to the United States. Some people come for financial reasons. Some people come because they are being persecuted in their own countries. And some of you are here because your parents, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, or even your ancestors came to the United States a very long time ago, and you have been, your roots are pretty much here. You may not even know anywhere else in the world, especially if you do not travel. But even if you do, you visit many different parts of the world, and as much as there are beauties here in the United States, many cities, many monuments, rivers, parks, it is beautiful. Some people make it almost a lifestyle to travel. There are families or individuals, even single people who travel around the world, would not let 1 year go by without traveling somewhere to see the beauty of nature, to see other wonders of the world. So it goes, a lot of people come right here in the United States of America also to see beauties, to see rivers, to see parks, to see monuments, to understand the history of the country. But through centuries, millennia even, there has been a very big difference between people traveling to other parts of the world to see beauties, to see the nature, and coming right here in the United States of America. And the major difference is a number of people who come here are more inclined to stay. The question is why? Why, indeed, a number of people, I would say across the world, no matter where they come from, whether their countries have a system of democracy, their country have a lot of natural beauties, and yet they come to the United States and they stay, and sometimes they stay very long. Sometimes they extend their visa, and they at times end up getting the label illegal immigrants. So of course some people just come here illegally to stay. Some people come on vacation, but they stay beyond their vacation time and they decide not to go back to their country. And that observation gets us to think as to why do people do that. Obviously there are other countries that has happened as well, but not with the frequency of being right here in the United States of America. No matter what the reason people come here, whether it's for vacation, whether it's just to relax, to get an education, whatever the case is, for a reason that sometimes we don't even care to find out. But we know, we have the stat, we have the information, we have the data that a lot of people from the world across come to the United States and decide to stay. Yes, some leave their countries with the intention of coming here and stay permanently. They come with a resident visa. Those are people from the onset that decide from their country, go through the whole process that's established by the United States for that particular country, and they meet the requirement and they come here with the intention of staying here or making a life right here in the United States. The bulk of the people who come here in the United States, whether with a residence visa, whether on vacation, whether to simply for studies. In fact, the United States of America has produced a lot of intellectuals across the world, head of states, president, prime ministers, generals, governors, secretaries, you name it. People come right here in the United States for all sorts of reasons. Now, even when they leave the country, when they leave the United States, they go back to their countries because sometimes they come to study, to get a degree, because they value the information, the education they get right here in the United States. And the reason for that is because no matter where they go, no matter where they come from, once they get an education in the United States and they go back to their country, their respective countries, they are welcome. Their education is well regarded because they got it from the United States of America. But the story doesn't end right there, because if that were to be the case, as you're seeing in the video in front of you, if that were to be the case, when someone comes on vacation, then they go back home, then that would be just it, because they would visit the next country and the next country and the next country. But what stats have provided us is the fact that even when those individuals who have visited the country for whatever the reasons is, education, vacation, etc., there is a very high level of probability that they will come back to the United States, sometime for vacation again, sometime to just stay permanently. So in contrast with all other countries in the world, people are more inclined to come here and stay here. But we have found out why. And the main reason, the primary reason that they do that, is not just because of the financial opportunities that the country offers. Yes, there is that too, because most people have left their countries, their respective countries, they come here, and eventually their financial situation have changed. They may have nothing back in their countries. They may have struggled financially, but the minute they come here in the United States, things change. However small those changes are, things change for them financially. In fact, even head of state, allies of the United States of America, when their public career is over, when they're done, whether prime minister, president, etc., they are very likely to come and even retire right here in the United States. The United States is a heaven even for most of the people in the world. Now, even countries where governments which are not allies of the United States, we call them enemies. Even those people, the individual, not the head of state, not the public official, but even the people, for instance, if we take the case of Iran, for instance, during the time that the Bush administration was waging war with Iraq, and of course the United States has been waging war across the Middle East, and Iran has been one of the countries. And despite the fact that their government has been waging war with the United States, which means the US and Iran, if we take it at the government level, they are not seeing eye to eye. And yet the people, the Iranian people, they yearn to come to the United States. So there is a certain attraction about the United States. Now, here is the main reason. No matter what other factors drive people to come here to the United States, the reason when they come here, they more likely to stay than if they go, for instance, to Spain or to England or to Australia, to any of those countries that have also a system of democracy. Now, if they were just after the system of democracy, when they go to France, they go to Spain, they go to Italy, they go to UK, it's not that they don't stay, but according to data, it is more likely that those individuals would come to the United States and stay. There is a higher percentage of those people who do those kind of things. So there is a reason, and here it is. Now, in order to understand what I'm about to say, I'll give you a very interesting example of something that happened right here in the United States. during the Bush administration, George W. Bush that is, while his administration was waging war against the Taliban, something drastic happened. And most unfortunately, whenever our government, even without our consent as we the people, go and wage war across the world, a number of people in the countries that are being attacked by the United States government, a number of people, innocent people, end up becoming victims of those wars. Something similar happened during the Bush administration, when there was a very aggressive campaign by the intelligence agencies to, especially when it comes to Afghanistan. Remember that the attack on American soil on 9/11/2011 occurred and attributed to Osama bin Laden, who happened to have holed up in Afghanistan. And even according to information, data, video, and so on, intelligence information, Osama bin Laden was stationed in Afghanistan and found a welcome reception from the Taliban at that time. So when 9/11 happened, the Bush administration, or at least the people who were tasked for the security of the United States, they went to Afghanistan and they did something that, in the name of we the people of this nation, they rounded up almost every single man who was, I shouldn't even say men, I would say young men, 16, 15, 16 years old and older. And this is not a story, this is a fact, that most of those men, especially in the very vicinity of Islamabad, they rounded all those men. Women were spared because it looks like, by all accounts, information, that they were as innocent as a child. They didn't know what was going on, or sometimes they just find themselves embroiled in situation they weren't looking for, they didn't ask for. So the United States of America went to Afghanistan and rounded almost every young man. Those who did not have time to escape, they rounded everybody. Now, I'm not here to tell you a story about the war. I'm not here to tell you a story about Afghanistan, but I want you to understand why so many people from the world across come to the United States and what they have in mind when they come and why they want to stay, even after suffering in the hands of our government. So in the process of taking all those men, our government either interviews some of them on the spot, and some of them end up being tortured to the point of being killed, no kidding, and those who survive after torture, especially those who are somewhat older, starting at 18 years of age, they took all of them and they transported them to Guantanamo. Now the story is sad enough to make you feel that why in the world do we let our government do those kind of things? Granted, we were scared because 9/11 was not a small event. That wasn't a small tragedy for the United States. That was the first time in the United States something so big and tragic happened. So everybody was scared. So we pretty much give the government a blank check to do whatever it takes to keep us safe. So the government used that blank check and indiscriminately went to Afghanistan, rounded all the young men, and brought them in very inhuman way, I might add, to Guantanamo. But there is one particular story, and that's the reason I bring that story forth. There is one particular story that is of importance for our conversation today. There was one of those young men they captured, and it so happened that years before the 9/11, that gentleman was right here in the United States. He was in the United States studying. He went to universities here in the United States. If I'm not mistaken, he spent either 3 or 4 years here. So when this whole thing was happening, and it was happening extremely fast because all the young men were being literally yanked from their families by intelligence agents to be transported to Afghanistan. That young man that I just mentioned, unfortunately, I don't recall his name. He said to his brother, he has a brother who also was yanked from the family, and he reassured his brother. He said, "Don't worry, it's just a misunderstanding. Once we get to America, this whole thing will be sorted out, and we will be released." Now, I want you to understand the interesting aspect of why people leave their countries and come to the United States. It's not just to visit the beautiful sites. There are plenty. It's not just to see the rivers, the parks, the monuments. There are beautiful of those as well. But something more important brings them, attracts them right here in the United States of America. And this is more important. This is a bigger focus for the people who leave their countries to come to the United States. Yes, they admire the monument. They like the rivers. They like going to Washington to see the beauties. But this is not the primary reason that people come to the United States. As I mentioned earlier, they come to visit. But there is a much bigger reason, a much more important reason they come here in the United States, and they want to stay. That gentleman from Afghanistan, now he's being yanked, and by yank I don't mean can you please get in the truck. I'm not talking about they just say we're going with you, we need you. They literally they put a bag over their head, a black cover bag over their head. You cannot breathe properly. You don't even know what's going on. It's like if you were to wake up in the middle of the night and you hear a bang on the door, that alone would have startled you. Now forget about that. Now in the middle of the night you have a bunch of well-armed people coming, break down the door not knocking at the door, breaking down the door and yank you out of your bed in pajamas, maybe even naked. Didn't even give you a chance to get dressed, just yank you out of your bed. And if you were to be married, or if you are the girlfriend, they yank your hands from the bed, and they literally toss you into a truck. This is the United States government abroad, and that's how the government that we give power to do those kind of things, because we say we'd like to be safe, but at the same time we do not have any control over what they do overseas. Now, if you want to understand why people from the world across want to hurt America, this is a story that you need to investigate further. But again, as I say, I'm not here to talk about that, because this is not the story. The story is about trying for you to understand why people, despite of all those things that are happening to them, they come to the United States and they want to stay. Yes, financial reason, they come here, they like it. They come here to see the beauty. But the reason is in that story that I just gave you. That young man who told his brother, don't worry, I know it's tough, I know we're being mistreated, I know this is a misunderstanding, because in America, when we get there, things will be sorted out and we will be released. This is a very telling story, a very lovely story. It is the story of America, that people who come to visit, people who come to study, people who come to see the beauties, this is what they live with. That gentleman came to the United States to study, left, go back to his country, and here's something that happened. Something bad, something terrible. He was being mistreated. Not just he and his brother were yanked from their families, tossed into a truck, bound, hand, chain on their feet, bound, put in a chopper, take to Guantanamo. That was in the most inhuman way possible. Yes, our government say we are doing things to keep you safe, and in the process they picked up a number of innocent people. Some of them are lucky enough they survived. They mistreated them, they killed them, all in the name of keeping us safe. Now, fortunately for those two gentlemen that I just mentioned, they did survive. In fact, I would say 4 or 5 years, or it could be 7 years ago, they gave an interview on NPR. And that was heart-wrenching, because of the fact that the story that I just mentioned to you, the story that the guy told his brother not to worry about because it will be sorted out, guess what? He and his brother spent a lifetime in Guantanamo. So the story didn't end badly, but it didn't end too well either, because he spent a lifetime in Guantanamo being tortured to tell a story that he didn't have, because he didn't know Bin Laden, he wasn't involved in terrorism, but he went through the same torture as the rest of those people, because our government wanted anyone to say, yes, we were part of it. So that gentleman ended up living to tell the story. He and his brother were mistreated in Guantanamo, even though he had no part in what happened on 9/11. The bottom line is, the story he told his brother is the reason that most people left their countries. That's the reason most people end up coming to the United States for visit, for study, for anything, but they come back because they believe, as that gentleman did, when you are in the United States of America, things are sorted out, no matter how bad it looks. But because this is a system of democracy, eventually things will sort out and we will be released. That's what he said to his younger brother. Don't worry, things will sort out. When I come back, we will tackle the second part of this conversation, basing the system that we have here, using that as the foundation to talk about why the nomination of Brett Kavanaugh has been cancelled. Because this story that I just gave you, this story is not a fairy tale. Is something that happened to a family in Afghanistan that suffered greatly in the hands of our government. They didn't die, they were tortured, they were humiliated, but one of them who came to the United States prior, learned the system of democracy we have here. In other words, the system of justice we have right here in the United States. And those people, that gentleman, believe the minute he got transferred, he and his brother got transferred, taken to the United States, things will be sorted out and we will be released. That was a wonderful thought to have about a country. Don't worry, brother. As soon as we get to the United States of America, things will be sorted out and we will be released. I'll be right back. There are two small corrections that I need to make. Number one, during the pre-recorded video, I made mention of 9/11/2011, but rather it's 9/11/2001. So the attack on America did occur on 9/11/2001, not 2011. And the second correction, I mentioned that bin Laden was and some of the terrorists were picked up from Islamabad, and that also was wrong because Islamabad is in Pakistan. So the correct information was most of those terrorists in Afghanistan were either in Kabul or Kandahar. So again, those are the two corrections from the video. I'll be right back. I thank you very much for taking the time to listen to the first episode in regards to the series of the nomination of Brett Kavanaugh. The series is nomination of Brett Kavanaugh has been delayed indefinitely. This is the first episode. We will bring you on Monday the episode number 2. There are 4 of such episodes in which we lay down the foundation. So the episode 1 you just listened to is to provide you kind of a background as to why it is important to safeguard, to preserve the system of democracy we have. In order to do that, we have to make decisions that help keep that system alive, nurture it, not destroy it. And the nomination of Brett Kavanaugh will do just the opposite. I hope you have a great afternoon, a great evening, whichever it happened to be for you. I hope to see you very soon.